He's here. He's getting ready.
He's getting ready, boys. He's getting ready for the interview. Yo, this music is funky.
I thought you were gonna say dog shit.
Nah. It's pretty good. Yeah, just DM'd him to hop in the live stream waiting.
I'm liking it.
I hope that his profile picture is like actually who he is, because his profile picture is the most fucking veteran photo I've ever seen in my entire life. It's yeah, look, you can barely see it on stream. How's it going, Junk to Bot? All right, welcome. How about you introduce yourself to the stream? I mean, obviously I have you as a former captain of Joint Command Afghan Military and Training, right? But like, what does that mean? And or if that's even really the important thing, how you found out about us, and tell us a little about yourself.
Well, I found out about you because I was listening to one of those debate panels on Prime K's thing, which are always absolutely useless because actually that one was pretty good because you and it's mostly just you and that Katie chick arguing with each other, and her making an ass of herself. But
oof, you heard it here, folks. Katie was indeed making an ass of herself. Not my words.
Like maybe we'll get into just the flaws of the hubris of Marxists later. The moral sanctimony and hubris of these people is mind-boggling.
Especially the ones that don't even know that they're Marxists.
Yeah,
those I think are the worst. The ones that like follow the ideology and the philosophy and speaks through them, and they don't even realize it. Those are the ones that really are confident that they know what's going on.
Yeah, that's a whole rabbit hole to go down. But as far as my role at the time in 2008, 2009, I was in Afghanistan. I was a captain in the Air Force, and it was kind of an interesting situation for me because my normal job in the Air Force as a commissioned officer was a cognitive scientist in the Air Force Research Lab. And
pause.
Sorry,
that sounds fucking cool as shit.
Already throwing us a curveball.
I mean, you reached out to us, so like I didn't do a ton of research. I mean, I read that Substack article that you sent me, which was interesting. But I mean, that only kind of gave me an inkling of yourself. But I mean, yeah.
Well, it's funny, and I promise I'm not just like trying to use you as some outlet to Destiny, but I listen to Destiny like argue with people a lot, and the things that really frustrate me, while I do believe that he is for the most part an intellectually honest actor, but I think he subscribes to some fundamental misconceptions, and he places misplaced trust in institutions, and it's interesting to me because, for one, I worked in the Air Force Research Lab. I had about 8 years of career experience in drug testing and seeing how the acquisitions process worked, the research and development side of the DoD, and then I believe your co-host here was in the military. Was
both of us were, but I didn't deploy. He did.
Right.
Yeah, it was in RC South.
Okay, and what were you? Were you Army?
Yeah, I was with 2nd Infantry Division, 38th Engineer Company, mostly with the Mobility Support Platoon until the end of the deployment, and I was on route clearance.
Okay, that's funny. I started my military career, so to speak, by enlisting in the reserve, the Army Reserve at 17 as a combat engineer.
And you went active duty because the reserves was bullshit.
Well, I went active duty because I ended up going to a military college in South Carolina, and the Air Force at the time was offering full ride scholarships. So I managed to finagle my way out of the Army Reserve contract and into a Air Force ROTC
Nice.
contract.
It's not a bad deal. It's not sore dick level deal, but not bad one.
It was a pretty good deal.
He escaped the big green weenie, boys.
But being in the infantry, you would be able to attest that for the most part, people who are getting deployed, they're deploying with a unit. They're deploying with some sort of combat-oriented unit, and so the people they're deploying with are people they know generally. Whereas nobody was sending units of cognitive modelers over, but what they would do was occasionally there would be an opening for a captain or a major or an officer on the joint staff there. And so that's how I wound up in Afghanistan, is because the command of CSTICA, which was Combined Security Transition Command Afghanistan, happened to need either a captain or a major, and my commander at the time at the lab didn't like me, so he volunteered me.
That's you got voluntold.
Yep.
You spent a lot of time in the talk, didn't you?
It was a frustrating decision, but I took it, as my only other option was to just resign my commission. And so anyway, what I was doing over there was, when we rolled in 2001 and we ran the Taliban out of there, the country was in disarray. They didn't have a military or a police force, and so the command.
I would argue they still don't.
You would be correct. The pretense of the command that I worked with was training and building up an Afghan army and police force, and so my role there as a deputy chief was supposedly coming up with policies, coming up with training policies, and monitoring the progress, the development of the Afghan National Police. But
yeah. So I mean, that seemed to be like the big issue that you were talking about in the Substack. And I, so I mean, when you sent the article, I was like, oh wow, this is really interesting, right? It seems. I would be interested to see what how your experience changed like your political views, right? Because I think for a lot of people that I've known in the military, they went in oftentimes with a very kind of just basic, knowledge of politics, and maybe they were Republican, maybe they were Democrat, or, usually they were centrist. They didn't really have any libertarian leanings, most of them. And so many of them become very libertarian because you end up in the military and you're like, wow, this is a fuck ton of people that have no idea what they're doing. Literally just
just an absolute fucking fraud the whole system is.
Yeah, so I would curious as how did this experience, what was that journey like for you, and where would you politically put yourself now? But where did you start? How did this experience? And for those that haven't read the article, maybe if that's the main thing you wanted to talk, sure we can get into a bunch of stuff, but how did your military experience do that, and kind of where are you sitting now as it leads you to us, the crazy ANCAPs that everyone says you should never talk to?
So I was, let's see, I think I was 25 or 25. Yeah, I turned 26 when I was there in 2008. And upon reflection, I would say that I most closely aligned with what somebody would consider a neocon. I think I was pretty supportive of the notion of well, now I say Western supremacy, but but really the delusion of of spreading democracy, and I didn't have such an intimate knowledge of how that system works, or nor was I very inquisitive. I was just kind of like, okay, politicians are kind of assholes and probably a little corrupt here and there, but in general, they're looking out for the well-being. Our government's looking out for our well-being, and if we're in Afghanistan, some our friends are threatened, or our allies are threatened, or we're trying to eliminate a threat to the people of the United States, and I didn't have a reason to really think a lot about that. But then after having been involved and after having seen what a scam the whole operation was, it may and having had some intense experiences and having seen the consequences of our occupation there, it really, I don't even want to say it forced me to reassess. I felt an existential compulsion to make sense of what I had seen and what I had taken part in. And the more that I tried to reconcile it and make it square with the notion that we were the good guys, or that we were somehow supporting some sort of a just cause there, the less sense it made, and the more frustrated I became. And then it just so happened that right after I got back from deployment, I happened to catch a segment on C-SPAN where Ron Paul was giving a speech in Congress, and that got me really interested in him. And because the idea of libertarianism wasn't even on my radar until that moment, and at a time when I was really needing to figure out some alternative, like to find a philosophy that made sense to me, because the philosophy I'd been subscribing to turned out to be horseshit.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that the funny thing about neoconservatism to me is it's really a band-aid on conservative philosophy, right? It really seems like the progressives and the left had this really strong basis in academia and in activism and things like that, and they were able to grow in their power, and the conservatives needed a response, and their response was the neoconservative movement, which was pro-war to fight communism, which eventually kind of morphed into the Boltons and the Bushes, and this idea of like they hate us because of our freedoms, like kind of like weird war on terror kind of version of things, taking up from not that it was like brand new, obviously, we had the Eisenhower Doctrine 53, but I mean, but regardless, I mean,
there was the Monroe Doctrine too, manifest destiny,
yeah, but I mean, like in the the shifting of the argument from like communism to like terrorism wasn't like an immediate day like switch in 2001, but I think it seems like it's a band-aid that hasn't really like grasped at any actual conservative philosophy. It's reactionary, to use the Marxist terms, honestly.
It's funny because prior to the 2001 election, when Clinton was still president, candidate Bush came to our military college and spoke to us, and his big selling point was we shouldn't be the world's police anymore, and everybody there seemed really enthusiastic about that, and he got a lot of support. And then a year later, we're gearing up to head to Afghanistan, and then
the machine.
I was
I mean,
Yeah,
Eisenhower warned us about it. The prison
and
military
Iraq.
industrial complex. The machine won't allow it. I mean, the only president that I can think of in modern times that hasn't run specifically as an anti-war president and has been elected has been Biden, right? Biden did not run on a campaign of like ending wars. Every other president did. Even Reagan, which was a war hawk, right? He ran on the idea of like, you know, we have to fight them there so that we don't fight them here, right? Like it was a cope, obviously, but he was still running in like this idea of like, you know, we can stem the tide and we can fight the communists economically and like we can find other ways to fight them so that we don't have the bigger catastrophe. But yeah, no, I mean, it's crazy how this machine works. I mean, what was it? Who was that guy? The guy in Virginia where he did that. We're gonna go to Hawaii and we're gonna go to Virginia and we're gonna go to Maryland. Blah! Right? Remember that guy?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Starts with a D, right?
Howard Dean. Thank you.
Yeah, Howard Dean.
Howard Dean was the only Democrat. He was the
Reagan.
only Democrat in the primary that was attacking the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq.
Yeah.
And the moment he did something weird, every single media news outlet were like, this is so unpresidential. He's unhinged. And they were like blasting. They were doing everything they could to kill his campaign because he was trying to galvanize against the war in a time where most Americans, this is like 2003, I want to say, most Americans were like totally for the war at that point.
Well, and he was, he lacked Trump's belligerence because the media sought to destroy Trump even more fervently than they shat on Dean. But Dean just rolled over and took it, whereas
Trump used it to his advantage.
Yeah, Trump was I guess he didn't really run as anti-war, but I think he probably ended up being the most anti-occupation president that we've had in
It's hard to tell. It's hard to tell. And the reason I have a hard time with Trump. Sorry, before we go into talking about Trump and presidents and stuff.
We don't have to go off on that tangent.
No, we're going to go off on a lot of tangents until you tell me to get back on track. This is how we're running things. This is going to be a shit show and everyone's going to love it.
Sounds good.
The thing I wanted to know, so do you consider yourself a libertarian, like just a general libertarian? Like where do you find yourself after those experiences where you kind of saw the war machine and the corporate war machine as it was kind of firsthand? Like where did that lead you to ideologically?
Well, surely I would be labeled probably more of a libertarian or an anarchist. My fundamental position is that is one of, I think, liberalism. I don't believe that any one person has the moral authority over another person, and I don't believe that I have any moral authority to impose my views or my beliefs on another, nor do I feel any obligation or recognize anybody else's moral authority to impose theirs upon me.
It's a beautiful answer.
Thank you.
You love to hear it.
You love to hear it, folks. You love to hear it. Okay, so back to the Bush thing. Oh, no, sorry, to the Trump thing. The thing that I have issue with Trump because Trump was really incompetent in his early of his presidency. And it's hard to tell what parts were his incompetence and what parts were the kind of the political behind the scenes machine tying his hands, right? Because we know that he couldn't fire anybody because it was made illegal for him to fire people, to quote unquote drain the swamp, if you will, right? Because he was locked in these impeachment proceedings and like was basically, you know, there was a lot of lawyers basically telling him like if you fire people, that this in some way, shape, or form could affect the impeachment proceedings because they could see it.
You're talking about like agency heads. He could fire members of his own staff, but he couldn't fire any agency heads.
Exactly. Right. So it's not like he could clean house. So the machine was kind of still working. without him kind of situation, right?
Yeah.
And so it's hard to tell, but at the same time, he kept John Bolton around, right? And like that to me was a very big red flag that like, okay, this guy's not an anti-war president, right? He was, but then believe it or not, maybe, we don't know, it's hard to tell, but is it possible that fucking Tucker Carlson kept us from fucking retaliating against Iran? You know what I mean? Like there was that whole weird fiasco. It's like, is this the news media lying? Is this Trump being incompetent? Is this like deep state people doing what they can and he just refused to budge? Like, what is this, right? And then at the end of his presidency, we had all Jared Kushner, signing all of these trade agreements to get the economy flowing in the Middle East and as well as between Kosovo and
well, yeah, he brokered a lot of trade deals between formerly hostile Middle East actors.
Right.
I mean, I guess to his credit.
Right. And so like that's really good. Trump's handling of Iran was absolutely politically brilliant and surprised me how accurate got that response. Yeah, I mean in the end his response his response was great. Right. I mean, and he's done this before. He achieved great success with North Korea by, success that eventually was lost. But I mean, what are you going to fucking do? It's crazy. But
despite the entire country's media trying to sabotage him at every step.
Right.
That was something that, boy, that was something that really made me angry and made me ashamed of. I don't know if I would say ashamed of my country, but just ashamed of the way that our media and our information system works here. Because, like, if you got friends in Japan or North Korea and you talk to them, they're since the 90s they've been watching fucking ballistic missiles sail over Japan,
right? And
they're like every day they're fucking terrified. They're living in a constant state of existential terror that at any moment North Korea is gonna just launch a nuke at them or aim one of those missiles at Tokyo or something, or at Seoul with, like, I think it's somewhere in the range of 44,000 different artillery pieces and bombs aimed at them, just 24/7, and then and no president since the fucking division of the Korean Peninsula has found it either worthwhile or politically expedient to try to really make any effort whatsoever to rectify.
I hate
this.
I want to interrupt for just a second. You were on a roll and you were doing great and you were passionate. I love it. Bill, as much as I hate this motherfucker, Bill Clinton did attempt several negotiations with North Korea.
Well, let's see. That was he's the one that made the deal to get to if they would not use or if they would not develop if they would not weaponize their uranium into plutonium, he would help them set up some nuclear power reactors.
Yeah, I think he failed, or either that or he failed upwards, either that or it was all part of the plan. I don't want to get too fucking conspiratorial,
sure,
but I do feel like it bears mentioning that, like, at the very least there was some involvement from Bill Clinton in that area.
Yeah, that's fair, and I won't argue on that. Though I do think that
I have my suspicions, as I think you do as well.
With it. But Trump really made never since the separation of the Korean Peninsula had the North Korean leader set foot in South Korea, and Trump convinced Kim Jong-un to actually visit South Korea under the banner of peace. And I mean, I thought that was.
He went to North Korea too, didn't he?
Yeah, he visited North Korea
without security forces, like a fucking boss, right? Like,
yeah,
like he walked alone across the fucking oh my god, what is the demilitarized zone? What the fuck the line is?
Yeah,
BMZ.
Oh yeah, that bridge.
Yeah, he walked across it by himself without a single armed person. I mean, they were standing right on the other side of the line, but like symbolically, like the fucking cojones.
And while he's doing that, while he's, recognizing that this is all a posturing game with
Yes.
Kim Jong-un, and while a lot of the people of Japan and South Korea are just thanking God that an American president gave a shit enough to actually come and try and make peace, our entire media is just trying to fucking torpedo the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Day in, day out.
I mean,
because it's more important to them to make Trump look bad than it is for to calm down and bring under control or to establish peace for the North and South Korea.
yeah, I mean, I remember during that entire situation, they're screaming at Trump, like saying he's going to get us all killed, doing everything they can to interrupt negotiations, talking mad shit, like
make him look weak in a posturing game.
They tried to make him look right. It's a posturing game, and that's the thing is that most of the West doesn't understand about Asian politics. Is that Asian politics is based around posturing and about honor and about strength.
Are you about to talk about Four Little Dragons?
No, I'm not. But yeah, it is a posturing game. I mean, one of the things that I always thought was interesting was Obama landed for one of the summits in China, and there was no one there to greet him at the tarmac, right? And he went straight to the hotel and went and spoke at a conference and got nothing done. And the media was like, "Oh, Obama, he's so great," and like no one in the media understood what happened. And what happened was the Chinese bitch tested him and wanted to see if he would get back on his plane and tell him to go fuck themselves. And like Westerners, we don't understand, we don't live that kind of, we don't view our politics that way, right? So like to us, we're like, why would you leave a fucking, like that's so non-diplomatic to leave. But like if that had happened to Trump would have known exactly what was going on and would have fucking tweeted some bullshit like, no one was there. This is an absolute disgrace. Disgrace. And it would be spelled with an 8 or some shit because he's a fucking idiot on speed. But you know what it is?
I don't have time for these losers.
Right. I don't have time for these losers. Right. And then he would fucking get on his plane and dip out. Right. Oh, hey, dude, fucking 21 Woodsman. Let's go. Fucking putting in work.
I'd love to see you growing again, man.
Love to see you growing for the first time. Wink, wink.
It's true. He is a brand new streamer.
Yeah, we're talking to former captain of a joint commission, Afghan military, in charge of training the Afghan police and military. I'm talking about the shit show of the military industrial complex, and currently talking about the media and the Trump administration and how they treated them in foreign policy in the East. But one of the things that struck me so too was like the whole time that they're trying to tank these negotiations, Kim Jong-il's sister is at the Olympics, and they're like, and all of a sudden they're like, slay queen, look at this powerful, beautiful woman. And it was just like, if nothing would have made you more, it was that moment. And I think the other moment that for me, that was just like, Jesus Christ, what are you guys doing? Was that the only time that they ever treated Trump as if he was actually our president was when he was using false information provided by oh my God, what are the white helmets? I can't think of their, but provided by the white helmets.
Peacekeepers?
No, not the peacekeepers. The guys that do testing of chemical warfare, and they're supposed to be non-biased, but they're supported by like World Economic Forum, large institutions that want like one big global world. And we have several whistleblowers and documents proving that they lied to the Trump administration about chemical warfare. And they were like, President Trump seemed so presidential when he was bombing innocent civilians. He seemed like such a good president. As for the first time, I'm proud to say that Trump was our president, that he made the right choice. And it was like their entire narrative switched the moment he was just listening to John Bolton. And then the last one, I think too, is that we have people that admitted that they lied to President Trump about troop withdrawals from Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and none of them are in jail. They literally committed high treason.
Yeah. The boy. I put that in a similar category to like when we left when the Obama, who does not deserve credit from the Iraq withdrawal, but when we did withdraw from there and left all that equipment and basically armed ISIS, and nobody got in trouble for that. We leave all that shit in Afghanistan. Nobody gets in trouble for that. But if your buddy here were to misplace his rifle,
Right?
barracks or something, he'd be fucking court-martialed.
Oh yeah, we had a guy leave his M4 on the mine rollers of his striker, and they rolled out of the gate.
Oh man.
Yeah, no,
So-
Casimir, he bombed two different things. But from what I understand, one of them led to at least one civilian death. I'll have to look it up later. I could be misinformed on this, but I was pretty sure that there was the Shayrat missile strike, but I was pretty sure that there was another missile attack where individuals were killed. There was 16 casualties at the Shayrat, 9 soldiers, 9 aircraft, 1 SAM battery. So there was, of those, 7 of those individuals were civilians. So it was an empty base, but it wasn't fully empty. If you take away everyone telling you Trump was bad, Trump wasn't bad.
But like
Yes, Casimir.
Sorry.
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Engaging in chat as well. It happens. But yeah, so.
yeah, I was reading that one comment. It just says from Streamlabs about Trump supporting the essentially the genocide in Yemen, the Saudi war against the Yemenis, and to be clear, I'm not a cheerleader for Trump, but I credit him for trying to end our occupation in Afghanistan, and I credit him for not being part of the whole State Department CIA program to instigate all-out civil war in Syria and regime change in Syria. He saw Syria.
Yeah, no, I give him like a D-. Right, but he's the
recognized-
first president to get a passing grade from me in foreign policy in a long fucking time.
Yeah, that's fair. But I mean, that's because he wasn't part of that program. Like if it had been either Clinton or Jeb, it wouldn't have really mattered, because either one of them would have gone along with the program that the State Department had been, setting up the weapons pipelines out of Tunisia and arming the rebels there, because even Hillary Clinton pretty much blatantly stated that they wanted to draw Iran, they wanted to provoke Iran into that conflict in Syria.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting, is because a lot of the comments that you hear in isolation they seem benign, right? And I think that's part of the problem, is that when looking at kind of this machine, this corporate state-run military complex, of these different kind of individuals working together to keep this war machine going, it's sometimes you have to see the forest through the trees. And so often, we live in this 24-hour news cycle where people, are kind of like everybody right now wants to talk about Ukraine. Obviously, we'll talk about it some. And when we open it up, if you're willing to stay, Casimir probably would like to talk about it as well, because from what I understand, he has family there. At least some extended family there. But, everyone wants to talk about the Ukraine-Russia situation. And now everyone wants to pretend like they know what's going on there, right? And they brushed up on some Wikipedia articles and whatnot, right? And now they know what's going on there. And what they often do is the next time there's a big conflict or a big bomb or a big domestic policy issue, they'll switch over to that, and they'll forget a lot of what they learned in that conflict and stop applying it to the next thing, right? So it's like when I say ACC Picatinny has $350 million contract under the DoD that both Al Jazeera and as several other news publications. Al Jazeera broke it initially, but it's been other. If you don't like Al Jazeera, there's other publications that have published. The $350 million weapons deal that DoD did under the Trump administration in his last year, after Trump banned the CIA from selling weapons to rebel groups, the DoD just did it instead without telling Trump, and spent $350 million to several weapons manufacturers and contractors, except they're not producing or supplying the weapons. What they're doing instead is they're using brokerages in Eastern Europe so that the weapons can be Russian and Eastern European weapons, so that it doesn't look like America is arming rebels in Syria, in the Middle East, wherever these weapons are going. We don't know, but they're designed to be given to small rebel groups, right? And it's and meanwhile, we're also funding.
Don't forget the moderate.
Right, and we're also funding tons of money into Turkey and giving them weapons that we know that they're constantly losing or that they're constantly need more of for whatever reason. And we know that they're selling them to, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. I can't remember. I don't fucking speak Arabic, but HTS, right? Which is just Al-Qaeda under a new fucking name. And so we know Turkey's arming them. So but people aren't seeing that as like a bigger piece of the puzzle. And then, you know what I mean? And taking what Hillary Clinton said, taking when John Kerry admitted that we were selling weapons to ISIS, right? Taking all of these little pieces and putting them together and realizing that, like, dude, America, the DoD, the CIA, these corporate contractors, they're all working to maintain the wars that are happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the same thing that was going on. That's what I was seeing in Afghanistan with equipment and arms just being, I mean, it was just a black hole. And, you made that comment to me earlier about that little clip from Tucker Carlson with the guys doing the jumping jacks. They're failing at doing jumping jacks.
Yeah, hilarious video.
And like, what was funny to me or frustrating to me, when the Biden administration was pretending to be shocked that the Afghan National Army collapsed so quickly, and fucking anybody that was deployed there and actually worked with them and saw the state of the Afghan Defense Forces at any point could tell you, no, this is not a capable fighting force in any sense. And what we're doing there was not, in no way were we building a stable Afghanistan. We were throwing money away. We were throwing equipment away, and lying on reports to Congress. Not that I think that Congress cared that the reports were falsified, the progress reports were falsified. It's just they needed an official report to justify expenditures, justify State Department budgets. But yeah, from the start, I think the whole thing was just
I mean, every function of the military is built this way, right? And I think that's what people learn when they go into the military is the bullshit. Like, I had my own experience, nothing with war, right? But like, I've told this story before. I'll give the quick condensed version. Mark has probably heard it. So 10th Mountain, they come back from Kandahar somewhere. I don't fucking know. I don't know any of the names of that shit because I was never over there. But whatever, they come back, the guys over by the airfield. Right? And so because they're in the airfield at Fort Drum, they are not, they don't have access to like the hospital, right? When they do a sick call. and unless they have to go through a medic or a doctor before they can then like get on a van to drive to go to the hospital if they have some issues, right? And so we were doing post-deployment health reassessments. So there's PDHAs and then PDHRAs. Basically 90 days after you return from your deployment, we check up on you again. And I was working at the Soldier Readiness Processing Clinic, where we're doing this, right? So you come in, you get an HIV test, make sure all your vaccines are up to date. You talk to a doctor, and they ask you if you need to go to mental health. And we screen you, basically just do a screening for everything. Because what we found was soldiers would come back, they'd be super happy, and they wouldn't tell the doctor about their knee injury or their psychological issues, or they didn't have psychological issues, they thought, until they're trying to settle back in at home and realize Jody's been fucking their wife, and maybe they do have some issues, right? So we're talking to these soldiers, and what a nurse practitioner and myself found was I believe it was 11 patients who all had severe medical conditions. And the doctor on the airfield was refusing to let them go to sick call and was just telling them to drink water and suck it up. Right. And when I say severe medical issues, I mean like one guy had shin splints so bad that like his x-rays looked like fucking spider webs. Another guy had a heart rate that was over 160. Right. Another guy was having heart palpitation. These were things that was like, holy shit, you need to go to the hospital for, right? Like now.
Did you say these were guys that were just getting back from deployment? Or
these were guys that had just gotten back from Afghanistan 90 days ago. And this is how they were being treated in their first 90 days home. So, we send a report of like all of these issues up to Colonel Feistel. He tells us, yes, send it to the colonel of MEDAC, which is like, the hospital kind of medical, right? He sits on it forever. We keep asking him like, hey, what's going on? What's going on? We need an update on this. He's like, oh, you don't need to worry about it. And I'm like, well, if you're not going to tell us about it and we report it to you and you just say the situation's resolved, and I have these soldiers' phone numbers and I've talked to them and they're saying nothing has changed, then I have to go to the Inspector General's office. So we did. We went to IG, and I was like a smoking buddy because I vaped, but we weren't allowed to be I was at Clark Hall, like the main building that IG was also in, right? He comes down to me and says like, hey man, I know you filed this report. Do you want me to file the report? I'm like, what are you talking about? And he's like, look, I'm going to tell you how it is. The doctor that you're reporting is friends with the post general. So nothing's going to come of this, and you're going to get attacked, and you're probably going to get kicked out of the army, and that nurse practitioner is probably going to be fired. Or I can just throw this report in the trash and you can not worry about it. But I'm going to tell you right now, if this goes through, nothing's going to change except you're going to. And I was like, all right, fuck it, throw it away. Like, I'm not like, you know what I mean? Like at this point, I've done everything I feel like I can do. Right. And it's like one of the big regrets that I have is that I didn't that I just took his word for it, that I was actually going to get in trouble. Right. Like, because in my head, I think back and I'm like, I could have told him to go fuck himself. And I could have been like, cool, give me my court martial, got my paperwork. Right. But instead I was just like, I'm not getting fired. Like I pushed it to my colonel. I pushed it all up the chain of command. And like, I realized after talking, the more I talk to other people and stories like that, that's just how the military works. It's like there's so much lying and bullshit and false documents to just make the machine keep churning.
It's funny because
and Mark, I'm sorry.
It's all politics.
Yeah.
At the level I was at, working in the lab, where we're doing, we're partnering with private businesses and contractors to do research and develop new training technologies, or develop stuff like shift work fatigue models and whatnot, stuff that's commissioned both by the private sector but also has interest from the DoD. Even there, we were supposedly, when we're looking for partners for a research project,
Mm.
we're supposed to have a bidding process,
Right.
but
It's all by computer. Like the bidding process is literally like digitized for people that have already been pre-approved.
Yeah. The statements would be tailored specifically toward a specific company or contractor, so that they're, even if you go through the bidding process, only this particular company is going to fit the bill, and that was always usually because the lab director had a good relationship with whoever was running that company. Um, so and you couldn't. There wasn't really any way to fight that. There wasn't anybody to go to. So it was. Anyway, it made me really disillusioned, probably in a similar way that you felt disillusioned, in knowing that you couldn't really do anything to change how these service members were being treated after their deployment.
Yeah, no, I mean, like, these are guys that like just came back from like not to say that any deployment is fun, right? You know what I mean? Like, or anything. I mean, like, well, actually, a lot of people say it's fun, but but also fucked.
You make the best of it.
Right, but this isn't like people that just got back from like Kuwait. You know what I mean? Like, these are guys that were in the thick of it, and this was 10th Mountain. This was like, this was infantry, right? Like, if there is any group of people that like were seeing some real shit, it was these guys. And they're coming back and none of their medical needs are being taken care of. And they're being told to just drink water and shut the fuck up. And if they push the issue, they're just a malingerer that needs to get kicked out or needs to get in trouble, or, threatened with Article 15s and things like that. And it's, and that doctor's probably still fucking got a medical license, still doing shit.
Were these guys Army or Marine or
Army?
What?
10th Mountain is an infantry division.
Army was notorious for so when somebody gets deployed and they come back, they're supposed to, I believe, get at least either 90 days or 6 months before their next deployment. And Army would do shit like transfer people that were just coming back from deployment into a different unit that was just about to be mobilized, to get around that downtime. That
Army still does that
all the time.
They would do shit like when I being an Air Force officer, when I was deployed to Afghanistan, I could still claim San Antonio as my home, my residence, and thus I was getting housing allowance for San Antonio rate of housing allowance. And Army guys, they were having to change their place of residence. I think it was to Kuwait, if they were deployed, because then the Army could pay them less housing allowance than what they would pay for a U.S. resident.
Yeah, we get it. Fucking Air Force gets more money. Rub it in.
Dude, the Air Force guys on Massagar, they got like $3,500 a month just in substandard housing pay.
Fuckers. That's what you get for being smarter. Oh fuck!
I should have joined.
I should have joined. I had a fucking perfect ASVAB in like 132G. They told me I needed a moral waiver for my test. Didn't want to do it. I could have just pressed. I could have just been like, nah, you can give me the waiver. If I'd have gone and talked to him after getting my ASVAB, they would have signed a fucking more.
Yeah, we had a guy, I think he was at Spin Boldak. He kept going to the doctor for chest pains and like shortness of breath, and they kept just pushing him off and telling him to drink water. Then when we got back, he went to the ER and they found out he had a cardiac tamponade, and they drained like a full large the big fat syringes, drained a full one out of his heart.
Like one of those fucking 10 gauge fuckers.
Yeah. Said he probably lost 10 to 15 years of his life.
Oh, I was one of those guys that came back, and my wife at the time was getting banged by Jody. But if I would have told anyone, they would have just treated me like shit. So I just PCS'd and got divorced. Fuck, man. Fucking, I wish that like was surprising or an uncommon story. That is just.
We had one of those in my unit.
It's
He
fucking
found out
every
while we
unit's
were
got
deployed.
one. Sorry, you were the one in the unit, or the one of many probably, but sorry, you were one of those. Isn't your gas costs also paying for your healthcare system too? One of many, yeah, 100% ghost. Yeah, so I mean,
Oh, sorry.
no. I just wanted to switch off to something. How do I noticed that you were watching these panels and things like that, looking for a military perspective that actually made sense. And you said you were coming to us, quote, not to get at Destiny, but to like get some of these ideas put out there. Like, are there specific things? Because I mean, I read your article, and I'm definitely going to throw it in the Discord for anybody that wants to read it. But are there experiences that really like opened your eyes that you really wanted to share? Like some of the details. I understand that like for certain things you can't be too specific or getting doxxed, but
Like one of the things, and I briefly mentioned it earlier, and I've mentioned it in that article, was so part of my job in Afghanistan was, we had all these different training facilities, usually at forward operating bases that were training these Afghan police and Afghan army. And part of my job was to compile the reports of training progress and training output. And so at the end of every cycle, or usually a couple times a month, I would reach out to all these places and say, how many guys did you train this month? And so first of all, this was kind of a fucked up system, because while the Department of Defense was funding this training operation, it was actually being carried out by contractors hired by the Department of State. And the Department of State contractors were able to basically stipulate all the terms of those contracts. And one of the funny quirks of it was literally the training output figure. It was proprietary information that belonged to the contractors.
I'm going to pause you for just a second, because military guys end up speaking to each other and then nobody knows what the hell we're talking about. So the companies that were hired by the Department of Defense to train police officers and the military, the amount of people that they were successfully training and putting out as like fully trained individuals ready to defend and protect Afghanistan was knowledge that the contractors did not even need to share with you, who was in charge of compiling this information to send reports up the chain of command and up to Congress. And so it's like, even though the very thing that they are charging the DoD money to do, they don't actually have to report any metrics of success or failure on those things.
They didn't actually have an obligation to tell me the output number. And now generally they would, or they would give me a number. But then, like, the second part that I wanted to get to that I found just absolutely absurd was I would then compile this report, and I submit that report up to the general staff, and there were a couple of times, and one time in particular stuck with me, where the output number was not anywhere close to what the projected number was to be. And so this
in the article you said it was like it was around 150, and which was like half of what the projected outcome was, which was 300.
It was substantially less. Like that. I mean, that was a number I just pulled out of my ass to give an example there. But it was substantially less than what the the projected figure was going to be. And so this Marine Corps major from the general staff comes in, and he's like, what's going on? Did you know, are you sure these numbers are right? I'm like, hey, that's what everybody's telling me. That's that these are the figures that are being reported to me. And he's like, well, can you know, it's supposed to be this. Is there any way you can, you know, double check, or is there a different way that these can be counted so that it you know, matches this projected figure? And I'm like, no, there is no way that
That I can
there's
just
no way
lie
to
on a
plot
report
this number.
designed
Do
to
you
go to
want me-
Congress.
Are you asking me to just say that we met the projection? And he said, yeah, we need the report. We need this report to say that we met the projection. I was essentially being ordered to fabricate a report. Now, this report literally goes to Congress, and this is what they're using to justify the expenses there, the expenditures.
Right, the trillions of dollars that we're spending in Iraq and Afghanistan, these reports are saying, look how successful we are in training a military, and that's not happening at all because you're being ordered to lie about those numbers.
Yeah, and I don't think that like some really observant legislator is going to look at that and say, hey, wait a second, I want to double check this. They just want an official report, and they don't really care whether it's truthful or not, just as long as they have a report to justify that expenditure.
Well, I mean, it's, the thing that struck me the most out of your article was when you were talking about like the amount of military equipment and things that just got lost. I think was the thing that blew my mind.
And this goes back to the capabilities of this defense force, because as I mentioned in the article, the ANP, the Afghan National Police, and the Army, they were around 95% illiterate.
I'm getting water, but I'm listening.
You got to understand that the vast majority of the people that were being recruited for these defense forces were illiterate teenagers from villages that didn't have electricity, scattered all around the provinces of the country. And so they would show up there, and they would be put through these training programs, and whether or not the training was successful, or whether or not they were even actually passing, is questionable, and not a piece of information that anybody was obligated to give me. But what we could see was that for one, most of them were high on opium. They didn't know how to use any of the equipment we were giving them. They didn't know how to read any sort of like maintenance manuals or anything. We're giving them Humvees. Mostly we were giving the police a bunch of Ford Rangers.
You mean Tatas?
Yeah, but
recoilless rifles on the back.
Yep. I think those were Russian Dishkas that they're putting on there.
I want one of those so badly.
But we're giving the Army Humvees, and that's a sophisticated piece of equipment. And these guys couldn't read; they couldn't maintain these things. The ones that actually arrived at Afghan National Army facilities would break down and then just be sitting out there, just trashed. And that's the ones that even made it. A lot of times, these vehicles would just disappear en route, and nobody was really looking into like where are these things going, what's happening to these expensive military vehicles, or the weapons we were sending them. And so like fast forwarding to last year, during that evacuation, and the notion that these people were in any
well equipped, right?
that they were in any state to offer resistance to actual fighting force coming up. I mean, it was ridiculous. The expecting them to put up any kind of real defense after American troops pulled out was just silly.
I mean, the thing that I get, right, is, I hear stories like this, and again, this is kind of what I'm talking about, seeing the forest through the trees, and it's like, did we all forget that the Pentagon lost $2 trillion right before 9/11?
Literally the report came out, the day before 9/11?
Yeah, I mean, like, not to get conspiratorial, but just saying, like, how the fuck do you lose $2 trillion? Like, you can't have a 2 trillion accounting error, right? Like, this isn't a wallet you lost. Like, that money went somewhere, and like a thorough investigation should have found out where that money went. And, and again, I don't want to be overly conspiratorial, but it's like, it seems to me very obvious that many of the inefficiencies of the systems seem very intentional to me. I can't, like, Occam's razor to me. Yeah. Like, the simplest solution is just that we're losing this shit on purpose so that we can continuously justify, billions and trillions of dollars going to these corporations and wars that support a petrodollar.
It's an inefficiency if you make the mistake of assuming that their priorities are the same as yours, or that their priorities are their intentions are genuine. Just like the disaster of the withdrawal, that looked like it was incompetently done. If you assume that the Biden administration's priority was, the safety of U.S. troops and maintaining some sort of security, or not letting assets fall into enemy hands. But if you look at it as, there are incredibly intelligent people in Biden's administration, there are incredibly intelligent people in the Pentagon. If this is how it went down, this is how they wanted it to go down. So this is somebody is benefiting from this.
Yeah, no, Metzer, you're correct, but that's still an issue. Like, they couldn't account for $2.3 trillion, right? Like, you should be able to account for that much money. Like, money is just being wasted and spent in places, and we don't know where, and it's being overspent in areas. And it's the same thing with kind of what you were saying. It's like, again, we don't know. That's the real answer, is that we don't know. But we have to put these things together and see that there's obvious, the best explanation is incompetence. And I think incompetence with the property that is taxpayer money, right? In the way that they justify murderous wars in other countries, and then extreme incompetence, and that's the best case scenario, in the funds that are used to support these wars, is already, in my estimation, a complete moral evil, right? Like, I don't need to assume that, like, the CIA is taking something off the top, or that the inefficiencies are planned on purpose to allow rebel groups to have weapons and equipment given to them. Like, I don't need to assume all of those things that honestly seem likely, but I can't prove, right? I don't need to get conspiratorial here. Just, spending, what is it, like, something like $4 trillion on the Afghan and Iraq war, estimated, when our national debt's 30 trillion, is like enough for me to call that taxation without representation, number one, even if you're not like a hardcore libertarian, because it's a inflation tax on a generation that doesn't have the ability to vote. And from my perspective, immoral, just in the system, in the way that they're involuntarily taking my wages, my labor, my family's wages and labor, via a vote that people lose. Like, it's just all fucked.
I mean, when it comes down to it, what are you going to do about it? What do you like? What does anybody? We're
going to vote the right people in.
Yeah, vote. We're going to vote the right people in. When we have, if only the right socialists were in power, all of this would be solved.
Right.
If only I was in power. If I was in charge, I wouldn't let these things happen.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's the answer you seem to be getting from just get Trudeau. Oh, God.
You mean Castro?
Oh, fuck. Castro's going to solve everything, guys. You just need to vote in some emergency powers and he'll get it all solved for you, boys. I don't know. I guess with the conversation, the way it's going, how about, what are your opinions on this whole Ukraine-Russia situation?
Well, I think this, I listened to Putin's his full address.
I got the bullet points from the media. I didn't listen to it.
He gave like pretty much a 40-minute rundown of the history of like how this situation came to be. And but an interesting comment he made was that something he got from Clinton back at the end of the Clinton administration. Was speaking with him, and the impression he got from reading in between the lines was that what it comes down to is the U.S. just cannot tolerate another independent superpower that has some sort of influence or can mount a competing fossil fuel market, and it really isn't under the thumb of the U.S. And now China owns large stakes in a lot of U.S. Corporations, a lot of U.S. media. They own a lot of U.S. debt. So we can't really do much about China. China's got a lot of leverage on us, but Russia doesn't have a lot of leverage on us. What Russia has is a lot of natural gas that a lot of the EU depends upon.
Yeah, we don't depend upon that shit.
And so they, they're appealing. They're an appealing market for a lot of Eastern Europe, and I think that he's got the right of it. That say what you will about Putin. I mean, I certainly wouldn't say he's a good guy.
He's a dictator.
He's certainly just seeking to protect the power of his own regime. But he's not wrong. Like we're not the good guys here either. We're just two power hungry regimes, seeking to keep the balance in our favor.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really wanted to talk about it much on stream because everyone's talking about it, and so at a certain point, like, you have to voice your opinion on these things. It's parcel of being in the Twitch politics space, right? So I mean, if you're silent on it, I mean, I guess I could remain silent on it, but I mean, with you here, I thought it'd be an interesting conversation. The way I see it from my very limited knowledge, right, is that I do think the people of Eastern Ukraine deserve independence, which is what in name Russia is calling for, right?
Sure.
But I mean, given the way that Russia engaged with Crimea, I don't trust them in any way, shape, or form to actually be advocating for Eastern Ukrainian citizens who's, I don't trust them in any way, shape, or form to actually give a fuck.
Give a shit about them either.
Right.
The Biden administration doesn't give a fuck about the freedom and the liberty of the people of Ukraine.
No, of course not.
Any more than Putin gives a shit about those two provinces or those two regions there. He doesn't give a shit about their freedom. I mean, that's a strategic point. But that's why I'm saying, like, he's not the good guy. He's looking to protect the interests of Russian power, and we're trying to figure out how to push back against that and packaging it as some sort of respect for democracy or sovereignty of Ukraine. We don't give a fuck about Ukraine's sovereignty.
Well, I mean, the thing that I find that is most hilarious is that, like, what the two people are advocating for is, I mean, like, in name, right, is that Russia, Putin is advocating for independence of Eastern Ukrainian people that seem to want independence. And what America is advocating for is democracy and sovereignty of people, despite it seeming like Eastern Ukrainians tend to want their own independence, right? So if anyone is championing independence and democracy, hilariously enough, it's Putin, at least from my kind of like outside, 1,000-foot view. Whereas at the same time, again, like it just seems like, and there's so much weird shit, right? Like, there's, and it's so hard to tell what's real and what's fake. Like, was Russia dropping fucking, Russian passports into Ukraine, Eastern Ukraine? Did that really happen? Was that Ukrainian propaganda? Was that Western media propaganda? Did that actually happen? Man. Like,
how do you get reliable information on that?
You don't, because the sources can't agree on anything. And so I see so many people just blindly trust Western media sources, right? And then of course, there's the occasional commie or tanky or something that, just blindly trusts whatever the fuck Russia says. And it's like both of these sources are heavily propagandized, right? What it seems like more to me is that this situation is a means of a distraction from the horrible shit all of these governments, Europe, America, Russia, have done for the past 2 years to their citizens, for a bid to power.
I think it's hard to take eyes off of Canada. I mean, this whole thing in Canada, is basically a game of chicken between Trudeau, like the limits of Trudeau's authoritarianism versus the will of the people. And he showed, when it comes down to it, if it's going to be between, me blinking and showing weakness, I'll militarize the police, and I'll have them just go trample these fuckers. We'll just go beat the shit out of them. We'll confiscate their vehicles. We'll take everything they have. We'll take everybody's bank accounts. We'll declare them terrorists. This is just the most authoritarian shit that you could imagine. And
we did a whole stream on it last night.
Oh, okay.
Like 6 hours. Yeah, we watched the videos. They're like lying about fucking, people throwing a bicycle at the horses because the horses trampled an old lady. And then they're calling her like some white lady agitator, like trying to paint her as a Karen. And she's like full-blooded first indigenous person that had a walker that they trampled. And like they're tweeting about how the horse wasn't injured, don't worry, like fucking, and like just like they look like fucking Stasi.
It just shows how hollow the Trudeau's platitudes are. But in a similar vein, like I go back to like listening to that address Putin gave, and a thing that's interesting to me is, again, setting aside, his moral flaws, like it's interesting the contrast between him and virtually every president we've ever had, because if you listen to Biden or Trump or Obama or any president in living memory that I can think of, everything they say is fucking nothing. It's meaningless fluff. They don't talk. They talk to us like we're imbecilic children. They don't tell us anything of substance. They're not detailed about anything. It's all like, oh, we got to come together. This is a strong country. We got
God bless America.
Hard work. And listen to Putin, and he's talking about like specific. These are the missile systems that we're using, and this is a specific group that was attacking this specific group, and this is the year this happened, and this sort of attack happened. These were the motivations of these people, and he's talking to an audience that he assumes is intelligent,
mm-hmm.
and it's an amazing contrast to me, like that listening to that versus listening to the quote unquote leaders of Western democracies, and it's like night and day. And I don't like the guy, but I respect that he talks to people like they're intelligent adults.
Yeah, I don't it's a new form of a facade, right? If you pay more attention to Canadian politics than Trudeau, right? Like what you'll see, he did a lot of interviews where he was talking to where he was talking to the press, and he was talking to like science people, and like they did this like scientists and academics and stuff, and he had like canned responses, some of which were actually direct quotes from Wikipedia, right? And the media had put him up there and like propped him up, and his administration had propped him up with canned questions and canned responses. And the idea was to make him seem like the hip, smart, like, oh, I respect the science and I respect people. Like it's another form of a facade that is specifically cultivated to make Trudeau look good in a different way. It's not that he respects you. It's not that he like actually like talks to it's just a new fucking thing that they're trying out to trick people. It's no fucking different than what American and I'll have to find it, but like there was an interview that he did where like he had a canned response that was a Wikipedia quote about like quantum mechanics or something.
I remember this one. I remember this one because the fucking girls in the progressive Facebook groups were sharing that around and just creaming themselves over how, wow, Trudeau's such a science nerd.
Right, and it was a quote from Wikipedia, and it was like, they actually changed the Wikipedia quote afterwards so that you couldn't connect the two of them. Because people went in and edited the Wikipedia quote, and it was like a canned response that he had memorized, and it was very obvious that the question was a plant question, because they were like, well, I wouldn't expect you to know about that, and he goes, actually, and then interrupts and then gives a fucking Wikipedia quote that shows that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about anyways. Right, so it's the same shit. Putin's responses are 100% pre-written by his team. Of course they are. Every president does it. I know this for sure because you can catch unplanned interviews where he falls apart. He's like Obama. Yeah. But I mean, it's not like he's not smart. At least he can read the fucking teleprompter, unlike Biden.
Putin's a very intelligent guy. You don't survive a career in the KGB without being a very intelligent and a clever person.
You got to be two things: smart and a murderer. What were we saying, Mark?
I imagine he's very proactive too.
No kidding.
Anyway, I
gotta jump off. I've gotta spend some time with my lady friend, but I appreciate you guys bringing me on here. It was a
you're
fun
definitely
chat.
not an ANCAP.
Yeah, he's got a lady friend. You can't be an ANCAP. You must be a minarchist at the least.
She's just very tolerant of my extreme ideas. But I'm glad to have found your show here, and
I appreciate it. I mean, definitely stick around in the Discord. I think our Discord is, even if you don't like have the time or really want to watch a ton of our content, there's a lot of cool, smart people and good discussions that happen in the.
I could tell from the chat.
You just watched a clip from our Twitch channel, Fabian Liberty. If you like content like this, please like and subscribe here on YouTube, or go ahead and give us a follow on twitch.tv/Fabian Liberty.